Definitely not in a certain half. Want to remind everyone to download, rate, and subscribe to the 415ers podcast, coming to you 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on the Odyssey Sports Podcast Network with 95.7 The Game. Evan Giddings, Marc Randy with you as always. Okay, Marc, let's look at the offense here, because this was a game that I think is going to get sort of swept under the guise of, you know, just again, we talked about it off the top, but they just leaned on the Chargers all night. And the Chargers are a team, and especially a defense, that is a bend but don't break. The Niners defense didn't bend at all in the second half, but the Chargers certainly just kind of, I think they allowed the Niners to get primarily what they wanted in the first half between the 20s. But in the second half, to me, the Niners took what they what they deserved between the 20s. The Chargers shored up to me a little bit. The big area to me for the Niners on offense was on third down, and particularly third and longs, where I thought that Jimmy Garoppolo, even though his numbers were Jimmy good, 19 of 28, 240, a 94 quarterback rating, no touchdowns through the air. Of course, did have a rushing touchdown in the first half, no interceptions, one turnover forced by the Chargers in that first half by Derwin James. But the Niners didn't end up losing the turnover battle because of the late pick by Hufanga. That was about as efficient as I've seen the 49ers on third down. And look, they're fifth in third down conversions at 46.6%, including last night. They're third in the league on third and long, which is 7 or more yards, 38.5%. They were 9 of 17 overall on third down, 4 of 7 on third and long. Jimmy Garoppolo did what he had to when the team was behind the 8 ball, whether they could or could not run the football effectively. And that's, to me, where we're going to need to see consistency. It's not going to be so much as, all right, we got to have a total number of runs. You get to run the ball 40 times because you're extending and you're creating long drives on third down. That's where Jimmy Garoppolo made his money last night for me and the 49ers.
Yeah, specifically just to add on to those statistics there, Garoppolo on 3rd and 8 or more for the 49ers against the Chargers, 6 of 7 passing, 90 yards, 4 first downs, in a rating over 118. On the season, on those plays, 3rd and 8 or longer, Jimmy Garoppolo and the 49ers have converted on 45.2% of the time. That's second only to Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, converting just a tick under 47%. So the Niners elite on third and long, kind of an interesting number there. You wouldn't have guessed it, but the Niners, with all their weapons, they can spread it out. They're hard to defend because they can throw it to so many different guys. There were a couple of different third down conversions that really stood out to me. First of all, it was in the first half, 3rd and 12, 49ers down 13-3, about 5.5 left in the first half. Of course, Niners have the ball. A huge conversion to George Kittle over the middle. It was his first and only catch of the game. He catches the ball right at the sticks, breaks like 4 tackles, and rumbles for 5, 6, 7 more yards. Niners eventually turn that into the Jimmy Garoppolo quarterback sneak for a touchdown to get back within just a field goal. And then in the second half, the start of the fourth quarter, down by 3 points, it was the Juwan Jennings drive. These weren't really third and very long, but he had a 3rd and 5 conversion for 11 yards. Then on 2nd and 20, after a penalty on the offensive line, he caught a pass for 12 yards to bring him back to a 3rd and 8. And at that point, another catch and conversion for Juwan Jennings. He got this one only about 3 yards beyond the line of scrimmage, and then had 7 yards after the catch, getting the first down, making a number of tacklers miss, and moving the chains. That eventually becomes the Christian McCaffrey 2-yard touchdown run. There was another 3rd and 10 conversion on that drive when Brandon Ayuk had a conversion, a 24-yard conversion on 3rd and 10, all the way down to the 2, setting up that McCaffrey touchdown. So those third down conversions really stand out because they led to touchdown drives. And if you don't get them, the Chargers get the ball right back. And who knows, in the first half, they could have made it a 3-score game. In the second half, they could have immediately kicked it back up to a 2-score game. So those conversions, and not necessarily guys that you would maybe expect in Juwan Jennings. And again, it was Kittle's only catch of the game. The Niners difficult to defend in those spots because they can throw it to literally 5 different guys. Anyone that's on the field that is available to catch a pass is certainly possible to get it. You can't really shade one way or the other because you just have no clue where it's going.
Yeah, no, there's a lot you got to cover, and the Chargers are also missing their number one corner, but even Asante Samuel Jr. was kind of taken advantage of at times, and I thought the Niners did a really good job of creating space for yards after catch. Juwan Jennings, I think the 3rd and 5 to me is the one that stands out the most. It was just kind of like a little stick route. He dumped it off in the flat, and Juwan made a man miss, and then got up the field for 10 yards to extend the drive. I do want to, before we get back to the passing and receiving, I do want to get your thoughts on the distribution of touches, because look, there wasn't as many passes, I think, to go around last night just because of how the game played out. Obviously, there's 41 rushes on the ground. They had 29 pass attempts, 70 total plays, which was 10 above their average. So they actually ran the ball a lot more. They controlled the clock, I think 37 minutes to 23 in terms of possession. But Elijah Mitchell returns. And I don't know about you, Mark, but I expected him to be involved, but I didn't expect him to out-carry Christian McCaffrey. He had 18 carries. I know Christian McCaffrey also got involved in the passing game, so it's a little bit different. I think he had technically more plays called for him than Elijah Mitchell overall this game. But 18 carries for Elijah Mitchell. He comes back and is immediately reinserted into the ground game. 89 yards, about 5 a pop. His longest run was 12 yards, so he's pretty much just consistently churning out those 4 to 5 yard carries against a Chargers defense that I thought played pretty well considering how bad they've been against the run coming in this game. But Elijah Mitchell and McCaffrey, like that to me has got to be, if not the best, one of the top 2 or 3 duos out of the backfield in football. I know that there's one also going on in Miami with another Kyle Shanahan protege and Mike McDaniel. But if you're looking at 2 backs that complement each other just about as well as any backfield in the league, I know technically you could throw Deebo in the backfield as well because he also got the ball on the ground. But to me, Elijah Mitchell and Christian McCaffrey, they are a 2-headed monster that showed last night, even coming off of injury. Elijah Mitchell is only going to get healthier, that they can carry the load for a game between them, and it doesn't matter who's going to get 20 touches, 10 carries, or not. They can beat you on the ground with both of them, not just one taking the lead over the other.
Yeah, I'm with you. I didn't expect Elijah Mitchell to lead the team in carries. I did think that this was a really interesting thing to keep an eye on from the start. I mean, I even tweeted it out pregame, like rank the following players in order of most touches to fewest touches in the game tonight. Like, what's your prediction? And the 5 I wanted answers on were, the 5 stars: McCaffrey, Mitchell, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, and George Kittle. How would you think that these touches are going to be distributed? My guess was McCaffrey 1, Deebo Samuel 2, Elijah Mitchell 3, Brandon Ayuk 4, and George Kittle 5. It was close to right, except Mitchell was on top, and then McCaffrey and Deebo, Ayuk, and Kittle in that order. But I was surprised that it did, play out the way it did, with Elijah Mitchell getting 18 carries. He also had one catch out of the backfield. I think a lot of that is the way the game was going. The Niners just were dominant on the ground, especially in that second half, which is where Elijah Mitchell got most of his touches. And they were, totally fine with maybe, moving away from the pass a little bit in that second half. And you get in more passing down situations, you're going to get more Christian McCaffrey touches because he's just such a weapon out of the backfield, and Elijah Mitchell is not nearly at that level. So I think a lot of it was situation and game script. But still, I think it's fantastic for Elijah Mitchell. I mean, he comes back for the first time. He missed 6 games. And he comes back and is able to get a relatively normal workload in, and he was really effective on the ground, running hard once again. I think that's something to keep an eye on. I was expecting a little more just design touches for Deebo Samuel. I was expecting the same from George Kittle, but as you mentioned, this is a team where it might be one guy one game, and then the script is totally flipped the next game where you could see the opposite. I do think it's something we talked about last week where maybe you have to be a little, concerned about keeping everyone happy. I mean, I know that Jimmy Garoppolo addressed it post game saying, talking about fantasy football owners and, maybe this isn't the offense to have players on your fantasy team because they can spread it around so much and it might be inconsistent. But he said that they've got guys that are, team first guys that are selfless, that are willing to sacrifice as long as they get the win. And that was certainly the case, against the Chargers last night. Again, I mean, George Kittle, one of the best tight ends in the league, just 1 catch, 2 targets. Deebo Samuel had 6 targets, but only 2 catches. He had 4 carries, and he was a little bit more effective on the ground, had a 15-yard carry for 27 yards total, just under 7 yards per carry. These are guys that were effective when they did touch the ball, which is they didn't touch it all that often. It's a great problem to have, but again, I was a little surprised based on how those touches were distributed.
Yeah, and the quote that Marc is referencing was in reference to a question about both the maturity of the team as well as kind of the buy-in, knowing that a guy on a given day, like you're saying, is not going to get that many targets. And Jimmy said, look, everyone on this team, quote, is not about individual stats. Fantasy points for all the fantasy owners out there. This isn't the way it's going to work. But he said, we've got a team. He said, I think it showed against the Rams. Guys stepping up, showed again today. They don't care if they're getting 10 targets or 1. If we get a W is a W, and that's all we're here for. Now, I'm with him, and that works last night. But I am curious to know what that quote sounds like if the Chargers find a way to pull that game out last night, because the door was open, and it was open until about 30 seconds left in the game. I know we're going to look back on the stats and see how dominant a victory it was for the 49ers, like you mentioned. First downs, yards, second half. I mean, it was night and day. The Chargers got their lights put out, basically. But there is something to me to seeing Deebo Samuel with 4 rushes. He had more rushes than receptions. I mean, Juwan Jennings looked like a more trusted target on third down than a guy like Deebo Samuel was. And that could have been just a product of the game. But I do wonder if there's going to be some disgruntledness if there's not a win, because this is such a process-based team that I find it hard to believe that they'll continue to be the buy-in if there is a loss. And maybe that's just going to be the equation for the rest of the way. Like, the 49ers put together this team of massively talented skill position players. And as long as they win, nobody can complain. But I can also see some guys maybe not feeling that way. It was interesting to me to hear the tone of a Jimmy Garoppolo after the game. Look, that guy's all about wins. I think what was the record, like 10-2 primetime games or something like that. Like he wins. That's what he does. But he's also not a guy that's going to get the ball around to everyone and distribute it extremely evenly. I don't know, Marc. I thought it was an interesting quote, and one that, although last night a victory sweeps everything under the rug, if it doesn't turn out to be a win, I could also see guys being pretty pissed.
Yeah, I think this is something where it might become a story if the team struggles, they lose 2 in a row, they lose 3 out of 4, you get towards the end of the season and there's a chance they don't make the playoffs, then, you might hear maybe Deebo Samuel be a little disgruntled. I was a all pro last year. I was the reason that we made the playoffs. I was the reason that we got to the NFC Championship game, and was the main reason why we almost won that game. If struggles start happening and Deebo Samuel is still averaging 6 touches a game and 4 of those are on the ground, only 2 catches, maybe you start hearing something. But I think the team, despite the fact that there were those red zone struggles, they're still feeling pretty good about themselves. Again, they've won 2 games, for the first time this season. They're 5-4. They're so close they can sniff first place now in the NFC West. I think things are, still coming up roses for them right now. But I agree that if this gets to a point where there's a little bit of frustration just based on final scores of games, then you might see, some individual players look at that box score, look at their touches, say, hey, this is not equal what I'm paid. This is not equal what I'm capable of. Something has to change. But as long as the team is winning and they're on a course to win the NFC West and host a playoff game, I think we can sweep this under the rug like you mentioned, but it is something to kind of keep an eye on and check back in on every so often.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt.